the Staff Hearing Officer, and I call the meeting of Wednesday, July 6th to order. Today we have 2 items on the agenda, and I haven't received any requests for continuances or postponements, so we'll hear them in the order that they appear on the agenda. Under announcements and appeals, last meeting I announced that a project located at 200 Helena Avenue, it was a request for a coastal development permit and a development plan approval, was called up to the Planning Commission by the liaison, and it has been scheduled for a hearing on Thursday, July 14th, which is actually a week from this Thursday, a week from tomorrow, so it will be heard before the Planning Commission then. Is there anybody in the audience who would like to address the Staff Hearing Officer on items not on today's agenda? Seeing no one, we'll go to the first item, which is 2720 De La Vina Street. If the applicant would like to come up. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Bedard. I'm the assistant planner and planner for the project. This project is located at 2720 De La Vina Street. It's an existing vacant building, but the last use was retail. The proposal is a change of use and minor exterior alterations to the building and some site improvements. Some photographs here that are better. This shows the site here, the aerial view. This is the existing elevation street. This is De La Vina. This is the storefront elevation, parking lot interior elevation, one of the street front elevations, and this is the rear elevation. Goes aside. Goes aside if you want. So the project is located in the existing non-residential building was constructed in the 30s approximately and is legal non-conforming to the required setbacks. Today it's in the SD2 overlay zone, which applies a 20-foot front setback, and then it's also adjacent to a residential zone here, so it applies a 10-foot rear setback. The parcel involves, in this particular case, this portion of De La Vina also has the 10-foot public street widening setback. So this is the delineation of the public street widening setback. So the changes proposed to the building are the front entry, the existing, I'll show you on elevation, located within the front 20-foot setback. So the existing configuration is a single door with a side light. They're replacing the side light and making a double door there. And then here, this is, if you look at the photographs.
These are them. I covered them.
And then this is the photograph of this elevation here, where they're removing this window, leaving the top portion of the window, and then creating a new pair of double doors and a single side light opening on that side.
So this is still going to be recessed?
Yes, that'll still be recessed, and then this will be flush in this location. Those are the extent of the changes that involve the zoning modification. There are other changes. They're changing some roof equipment, replacing windows, restoring windows, or replacing these windows?
Just the glazing only, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you can see the existing windows are kind of
they're steel right now,
repair.
so the steel's there. We're just replacing the glass.
And then that's the front setback modification. And then the project also involves a rear interior setback modification to store the location of the trash and recycle bins within the rear setback adjacent to the residential parcel. So again, 2 discretionary applications, 2 setback modifications. The front setback modification to allow door and window alterations within the front 20-foot setback, and the interior setback to allow the trash and recycling to be stored in the interior setback. Staff is supportive of the project as proposed. There are some other site improvements we discussed. They're reconfiguring the parking lot, adding some exterior seating and site walls, exterior seating. Public Works, we reviewed it with Public Works. The improvements within the Public Works street widening setback are not an issue, so they do not need a variance from Public Works. And transportation has reviewed and approved, and building and safety has reviewed and approved the parking lot and ADA configuration. So staff recommends support of the project as submitted, as outlined in the findings.
A question about parking. How is parking established for the building? It looks like it was 1 per 250 for the whole building versus seats for the restaurant part.
Well, this is in the SD2 setback, so SD2 has its own parking setback that has the 1 per 250.
Or whichever is greater. It says or whichever is greater, so
Yeah.
it didn't. So the
Yeah,
seats
so
aren't going to exceed 1 per 250.
Yeah, there is some concern that we discussed internally with staff members, and I discussed with the applicant. We do have, she showed on the front page here. So it's interiors, restaurant, and wholesale, it's 1 per 250, and the seats. I can't go into more detail, but the seats were configured in such a way that they won't exceed the number of spaces. We did have some internal conversations among staff. We may have concern that there may be more seats in the near future, that could be a situation that could occur, but we've talked with the applicant, and we didn't feel it affected the zoning modification, so we didn't include it as a condition, but we will work through that in the building permit process.
Okay. And it's clear my approval has nothing to do with parking, so even if all those seats are shown on there, it's not that I approved that number of seats.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
I'm Lisa Stid Silver. No, we've just worked, back and forth with planning and everyone to come to this point, and we, feel that it'll be a great asset to the neighborhood once we're through all this, and the modifications should be supportive, I think, of this project going forward.
Okay. I do have some questions, specifically in regards to the rear setback modification. The front, the request to change the windows and that is supportable. The fact that there's seating in the setback, that's not an issue for a modification. It's a temporary type thing, so it doesn't require a modification. But in the back here, where it's adjacent to the residential zone, there is the required 10-foot setback, and you're proposing trash in this area. In the parking section of the code, it requires a minimum of a 5-foot interior or a perimeter planter and a wall adjacent to the residential zone. And I don't see any planter areas in this area, so I'd like you to explain what's going on within the setback, because the entire setback looks like it's being paved and utilized.
There's a photo of that area as well.
And I have a photo that's black and white, but it's just right now it's all paving to there. But is there any proposed landscaping in this area, or is it paving all the way?
Paving all the way for turnaround back there, so that's what we're proposing at this point. I mean, what we're doing along here, we can do the same thing potentially, where these are vertical planters that will be up along the wall, and we can do, maybe that would be another idea to do back here to create the green.
It's a code requirement. It's not one. The design boards have the ability to waive the requirement for the interior planter, but they don't have the ability to waive the planter for this perimeter one. They can waive the wall, the requirement for the wall.
Well, the wall's there. It's existing.
Right. So yeah, the concern I have was with the perimeter planter. Did staff look at that at all, or?
We didn't look at the planter component, no. We just were looking at the configuration with the parking and transportation and ADA and number of spaces.
Okay. And then in terms of this trash area, is it going to remain open to the sky, or are you going to have an enclosure or roof type thing, or?
Open.
Just open to the sky? Okay. And then, and you reviewed the location with Marburg? And they're okay with it here? The restaurant would just have to move it up, or how does the trash?
I mean, everyone that we've spoken to with Public Works and Transportation, I mean, we haven't had any issues, and Karen at EHS, so.
Okay, but you haven't talked to Marburg, so there might be some.
Spoken to them.
Okay, well, this is your proposal right now. If it doesn't work, then you have to come back for a revision if it needs to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Okay, and then how are you going to, this is hatched on the plan, but how are you going to keep people from parking within the setback? Is there any?
Yeah, I don't know what we'll do exactly. I mean, I would assume we'll do something within the pavement to discourage that, or whether it's notation or sign or signage.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then is this turnaround area, does transportation staff say it's necessary? Oh, that's what, is this alley going to remain open, or is the fence going to be?
No, it's to remain, and the neighbors, they also want it to remain as open, and just as the use as it's proposed now, currently. So, I mean, it is an access, and there's an easement for it, so.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if the turnaround area is necessary. If a truck's here, they could just use that to back out and have that be more parking outside of the area of the setback, but. Okay, those are my questions right now. I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to address the staff hearing officer on 2720 De La Vina Street? I see no one. Have we received any letters?
No.
I noticed at the design board there was indication of a letter of support from a neighbor, and then another neighbor, I assume it's a neighbor, address the board for other things. So, okay, I'll close the public hearing.
Yeah, it was actually a neighbor that lived back here, and their concern was with the access of coming in, and they just said they wanted it to stay, as is, just no new conditions for the actual egress or traffic movement patterns through there.
Okay, so no. They were expressing concern that this would be blocked off and not block it off.
Correct.
Okay. And then what was the letter? Oh, it says letter of support. Okay. So then the Catherine. Okay. All right, great. Thank you. I'll close the public hearing. I did go out to the site and viewed the neighborhood, and I was particularly interested in what was in this area, just because since it is trash and it's residential zone, just to see what the interface would be. And this side, it's not an issue. It's commercial and parking area, and there's a little small building in this area. So in regards to the location of the trash area, it is the appropriate area. It's screened from public view. It's behind the building. Hopefully that works out with Marburg. I don't foresee any noise type issues, because you're more than likely be in the back anyways, and with a truck, if the truck comes down here, it's going to come down here, whether it's in this area or if it's up in this area here. So, but my concern is with the landscaping, the requirement. So I would put a condition on the property that a perimeter planner, I know it's a code requirement, but just to make sure it's clear that it's implemented, that a perimeter planner be minimum of 5 feet wide in the area of the wall, so it's not going to block the access way. But on both sides here, minimum of 5 feet. That probably won't affect this gate. You'll have to relook at and maybe a different kind of gate, or pushing it back, or but it needs to be in this area, and that will actually help with consistency with the code requirements, because when you put the landscaping in here, a portion of the setback can be used for parking or turnaround areas, because at least 5% of that area is going to be landscaped. So. But I'd also want to put a condition on the property or on the project that this area where you're proposing loading, delivery, and turnaround, that actually painted on the pavement or concrete, that no parking, loading, delivery only. So that way people will see that it's not for parking. In regards, like I said in my intro, the requested modifications to change the windows and doors, that will be an enhancement to the building, and also even just this area for the outside seating area, that also I think will enhance the neighborhood from this, from the facade there. So with those added conditions, I can make the findings outlined in the staff report and approve your project. My action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority of all my actions, and if they felt this warranted additional discussion before them, they could call it up during that same 10-day review period, and if either of those were to occur, Michelle would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next project is 321 Oceano. Hi. I don't know what sheet you wanted it open to. Do you want this sheet open or the one that's highlighted? This one shows existing. Anytime you're ready, Tony, sorry.
Okay. Good morning, Ms. Reardon. I'm Tony Bauman, Assistant Planner. This is a project at 321 Oceano Avenue. It's on the mesa to the west of City College, just south of Cliff Drive. The project site is a 7,564 square foot lot. This is the front facing Oceano. It's currently developed with a single family house to be demolished, so they would start out with a blank vacant lot. And the proposal is a 1,655 square foot, 2-story single unit building at the front of the site, roughly where the existing single family house is. And then behind that would be a 3,453 square foot, 3-story duplex. So this would be a 3-story duplex or 3-story unit, 3-story unit. And each unit would have an attached 2-car garage. The project site is zoned R2. Let's look at the vicinity photograph. I went to the ABR in February, and they looked at it. They were perfectly okay with it, found it to be compatible with the neighborhood. It's a mixed neighborhood. In 1975, there was a big downzoning in the city, and this previous to 1975, it was zoned R3, and there are quite a few apartments in the area, in the adjacent project site. So to the north, immediately next to this site, is a large apartment building. So the size of the proposed buildings, the ABR thought was perfectly compatible. The neighborhood's a mix of these large apartment buildings and little old single-family houses, like the one existing at this site. So it's a pretty eclectic mix of sizes of buildings. So anyway, the ABR was able to make the project compatibility criteria and say the project was approvable. In terms of the staff review process, the project had a PRT review and 2 DART reviews with staff. And I guess regrettably, it wasn't until the second DART review by staff that we were going along reviewing the details of the project, the maneuverability, solar access, et cetera, looking at the fine points. And we looked at coastal policies, didn't have any concerns. Environmental review didn't have any concerns. And it was rather late in the game with staff that we realized that the project just doesn't comply with the density allowed by the local coastal plan map. So we find it, but just because of that reason, it's impossible to make the findings, so we can't recommend approval of the 3 units on the site, purely because of that inconsistency with the local coastal plan. So that's kind of a short, cut-to-the-chase description. I guess I can leave it at that unless you have more questions about the process or the project, or architect can certainly explain the proposal.
Mm-hmm. The only other thing you might want to state, which was included in the staff report in case someone's watching on TV, is the fact that you brought this up for a quick denial, right? That the action today can't be to approve the project because environmental review has not been completed, correct?
That's right. And there may be a little sticking point there again, kind of a technicality with a CEQA exemption, because we don't think it could qualify. Well, there's an exception to exemptions, and it looks like this exception, meaning that it's not consistent with density, could be a problem in granting a CEQA exemption.
Okay, so that's an important issue to point out, too, for someone who might be
Excuse
watching.
me, Tony, but wasn't there also something in the staff report that the project could be continued to make,
Yes.
and those CEQA findings could be crafted at that point?
Well,
to come
well,
back?
it would be figuring out the environment. It could be continued, and we could figure out the environmental review, which might be a negative declaration rather than a CEQA exemption.
Okay, so that was your presentation. Okay, would you like to state your name for the record and provide additional comments?
Sure. Keith Rivera, project applicant and architect.
Yeah.
So just kind of a quick overview of how we got here, and Tony kind of touched on it, but this actually goes back to a 2013 pre-case that the owners had with staff on the property. And at that time, they indicated 3 units would be supportable with a lot area modification. As Tony said, 2015, we had a PRT review. And again, staff said that they could support a lot area modification up to the variable density limits for the property, and that the next steps would be to kind of redesign the project accordingly, come back for a DART. So that's essentially what the owners did at considerable expense, as I'm sure you're aware. So we redesigned the project, used variable density, parked per ordinance, no modifications. Made our DART submittal last November of 2015. We got our DART letter last December, and so for the third time, the city said, yeah, they could support the lot area modification for 3 units under the variable density, and that the only approvals were going to be the lot area mod and the CDP. So we continued the DART process and, did all the SWIMP stuff, refined the architecture, was sent to ABR. ABR was very positive, was able to make the compatibility findings on the first shot, so that all seemed great. And then, as Tony said, then last March, with our second DART letter, we were deemed complete, but only at this point did the report come back saying that in addition to the lot area mod and the CDP, we need further action by City Council and Coastal Commission, and that now all of a sudden they could only support two units. So, I think just looking at the project from kind of a physical planning standpoint, I think we can most objective, viewpoint would be that it's probably the best use of the project, particularly given the high density context, the fact that it used to be R3, that it's going to be R3 again, and kind of where we've been through this whole history. It seems like the kind of highest, best use of the lot for the community. And sort of the irony is that now that only 2 units could be supported, I mean, the owners could conceivably come back in the same envelope with 2, giant 6-bedroom units sort of thing, and that would be considered, complying, although probably not the most desirable thing for the community. So we think we have a good project that's met all the requirements. There's no real issues with compatibility, and should be approved based on the process we've gone through, the merits of the project, and not kind of be tripped up by this sort of technical procedural issue. And though we understand that, it just seems unfair to the applicant and the owners, given all they've gone through to get to this point, and then kind of have the hiccup at the very end. So we would, hope for approval. Then continuation, we could craft the environmental approval or, negative declaration and come back for the approval again.
Well, the problem is, I understand the situation and the unfortunate part of it that it wasn't brought to the attention sooner. What I'm bound to is the findings I need to make, and that's not one of the findings. The findings I need to make is that it's consistent with the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance, and also that it's consistent with the coastal land use plan, which one element of it is the density, the specified density. So being it's not consistent with the density, that's the finding. And I understand the unfortunateness of the late hit, but I don't know if you can provide anything of how it is consistent with the land use density. I know typically with lot area modifications, when you're asking for over density units, there's affordability type requirements. And I know this is rental, but there's no affordability proposed. And it's 2 units over the allowable land use density. So that, I know it's a hiccup. I don't believe it's a technicality because it is a requirement that the finding be made.
And if there was an affordability component, would that make the difference?
Not in the instance of 3 units, it wouldn't, because it's still way over density. But it might, in order to get it to be consistent with the 2 units, with if another development was coming in that's legal nonconforming over density, the way that we are able to find that's consistent with the coastal plan is that it's legal nonconforming. It was built legally at that time. In this instance, this was built. It was built when it was an R3 zone, but it's been since rezoned, and so it is conforming to density. R2 zone.
It's R2.
Yeah, but it was built when it was zoned R3. Mm-hmm. Actually, do you want to state your name for the record if you want to provide?
Yes, Cynthia Froling.
And you're so you're an owner.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it was built when it was R3 and as a single family, and then it was changed to R2, so it conforms to the zoning in coastal plan now. And then was this part of the AUD and proposed for rezone that hasn't been submitted to the Coastal Commission yet?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so then that, although that's been gone through the city process, it hasn't gone through the Coastal Commission process, and so it's not a done deal. So I can't be approving projects based on some future action of the Coastal Commission. At this time, I'm bound by what the existing regulations is for this property. And so I can't think of a way to get around the consistency with the coastal plan. So I couldn't make the finding to approve the 3 units. I could continue it, and you can work with staff on a lower density project, or I could just deny it, and you can go up to the Planning Commission. They'd be in the same boat that I am, but you're always free to appeal it to the Coastal Commission. I'm sorry, Planning Commission, and state your case there.
So, Mr. Reed, one thing we didn't touch on was the fact that the R2 zone has slope density similar to the single-family zones. So with given the slope of this lot, 11.3% is more than 10%, which means the required lot area is 1.5 times the normal 50.
So for 2 units, you'd need a mod, wouldn't you?
You still need a lot area.
5250 square feet. So that would require a lot area mod for 2 units, a zoning modification, but it would be consistent with the local coastal plan density. So I don't know if you want to comment at this time on any support for that type
I
of lot
don't
area.
like doing that without an actual project in front of
Okay.
me, because if something comes up, that's always, then it's a sticky situation. But since it's so close to 10 units, was there a, 10%? Did you do a slope calculation? So that's
Yes.
been all verified. It's
Yes.
not, okay. I didn't know if it was based on a computer system or not.
No.
Well, the city data showed 12%, and the actual
Okay.
calculation showed it to be 11.3.
Okay. So yeah, I just, Those are my two options I see. The other thing I just wanted to comment in terms of zoning, garages are allowed to encroach or to be set back 3 feet from the property line in the R2 zone. This is storage area, so this couldn't, it has to be the actual garage encroaching. So this actually, these little pop out here is not consistent with zoning, so that would require a modification to allow it to remain. It has to be accessible to vehicles.
Yeah.
And it's 21-2, so that's just a side note for any future redesign.
All right.
That either a mod would need to be requested or to allow this to have this 3-foot setback, this has to be actual parking area, not storage or shelving or anything, or wash machines or. So.
Well, transportation planning commented that these items could be in the 20 by 20 parking area. Of course, this is 21-2.
Yeah, the depth, I believe, is part of the parking maneuvers that we worked
Oh.
out with transportation.
Right. That may have been this extra above 20 feet, I think, had factored into their
Unless
maneuverability.
it's designed right now, I understand transportation staff is supportive of it regarding maneuverability, but we do the zoning part of it and what the setbacks are. And so if it needs to be in this configuration for maneuverability, we need to look to see if that actually requires a modification. And that would be something that would, if it is necessary, it'd be one of the reasons why the applicant would be saying it's supportable. So as it's proposed now with the storage area in this area, the trash, it would need a mod. So I don't know what you would like me to do. I'm willing to do either one, to just deny it and you appeal it and go up to the Planning Commission, or I can continue it and you can continue to work with staff on a revised project that could be supportable.
Can I ask a few questions? So if we were to go on to
You need to go to the Planning.
so if we were to go on to the Planning Commission,
Nope, it's that way. She just moves it closer to her. You can,
if
you
we
can
were
move
to
it.
go on to the Planning Commission and then they just have similar findings, could we then review the 2 units at that point, or should we just go straight for 2 units now?
Would
Well-
it require a whole new application if denied by Planning Commission to come back with 2 units?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. And then my next question is, since we're 3 years into the project with full support staff findings, $60,000+ of our family's money based on the green light that they've given us, and now you're finding new things after traffic's already studied it and everything. What responsibility do you have to the applicants as far as city planning goes?
That's beyond the scope of this hearing. What I'm tasked with today is to review the project and in regards to the findings and to see if I can make the findings or not. That's something you can talk to attorney or whatever you want. I'm not giving. That's not my role in this process. To
Forgive
advise
my
you on that.
layman's questions, but
Yeah.
not sure who communicates together. But it seems like no one's talking to each other because you knew things are coming up like now.
I don't talk to people outside of the public hearing. That my discussion occurs within the public hearing. If I have questions, I forward them and say, these are the questions that I need answered for the hearing, and then they're discussed at the hearing. So my review of it is independent. I'm not part of the DART process. I'm not part of the PRT process. Any staff discussions, it all occurs without my involvement.
I think we did mention the fact that these could be shown somewhere else, these containers. If that was an issue, then this would just be parking. Because I think there probably is some alternative placement where those could be.
Well, that's something will have to be looked at because then that's a whole other discussion that could be. So, yes, if your application is denied on any level, then you submit a new application.
Is that even in light of what's transpired with the city not working with the applicant now at this point, with the light of the new findings?
If the application is denied, then a new application needs to be submitted, or you can continue it and work on a revised project.
And do we get a refund of all of our fees?
No. That work's been done.
The work is here that you've supported to this point.
You can work with the supervisor, talk to the supervisor in the development review section, and have a meeting with the planner and the supervisor and go from there. I'm not involved outside of the public hearing. And I don't make decisions on those types of things. Just like the Planning Commission, even if you were to go up there, they don't have the authority to grant refunds on fees. That's the department's authority or decision.
Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of assessing fees, that's again the department's authority, not the Planning Commission's, nor my role in this process. That's not my purview.
Okay.
So I don't know, do you want me to take a recess so you can go out of the room and talk, or do you want to ask for continuance, continue with staff, or do you just want me to take an action and deny it?
Perhaps if we could just have a brief recess so we can.
Okay, so I'll recess for 5 minutes, so that'll come back at 20 till 10.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'll leave the room too. So that's Just are reconvening the meeting. So I took a break to allow you guys to discuss it.
Appreciate that.
Yeah, so I don't know what you guys decided.
I think the decision it would be to ask for the continuance and then work with staff to create a supportable project as far as density.
Okay, all right, so I'll do that. I'll continue it indefinitely, and then so we'll need a renotice and all that, and look forward to seeing it at a later date. So with that, I adjourn the meeting.